Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today we're going to do another ship comparison video, this time comparing the Des Moines Class heavy cruisers like USS Salem, which we recently visited, to Battleship New Jersey. The Des Moines Class heavy cruisers are arguably the most powerful gun cruisers ever built. They were the last gun cruisers in American service, and USS Salem is the last one in the world that you can still visit. These ships were designed during World War II, starting in 1943, the same year in which the Iowa Class Battleships are commissioned. So the design process starts about 3 or 4 years after the Iowa Class designs are being made and the ships are being built. However, these ships are significantly more modern and benefit from a tremendous amount of wartime experience, which, although much of that experience is taken into account on the Iowa Class, some of it isn't. For various cost reasons, these ships are never retrofitted post-war with all of the experience, whereas new-built ships like Salem incorporate that from day one. The Des Moines Class heavy cruisers would first be commissioned in 1948. It takes a little bit longer to build them than normal in the post-war world, with finances being down and a lot of wartime cruisers laying around. So had World War II continued, I think you would have seen these ships roll out much quicker. However, they first entered service in 1948, and the last one is decommissioned in 1975 after 25 and a half years of service. 12 of these ships were originally planned. They would be the successors of the Oregon City Class, which were themselves the successors of the Baltimore Class. The Baltimore Class were arguably the best heavy cruisers in the world during World War II, although because of their lack of torpedo armament, you could argue for a different class of ships. They were some of the most modern and final heavy cruisers built during the war. The Oregon City Class made some slight improvements on the same basic hull, and the Des Moines Class, while very much you can see the lineage of the Baltimores, is a significant redesign. Because the war had ended, 9 of these 12 ships were canceled, so only 3 were completed. And of those 3, 2 didn't see that much service, Des Moines and Salem, but were kept in mothballs for a long time, whereas Newport News saw 25 and a half years of service, became the first ship in the Navy to be fully air-conditioned, and was the last gun cruiser on active duty with the Navy. So, how do these mighty vessels compare to an Iowa Class battleship? First off, they're only about 1/3 of the displacement. They're designed to be about 17,000 tons standard displacement, or about 20,000 tons fully loaded. So significantly lighter than the Iowas. However, that's not because they're significantly smaller. At 716 feet long overall, they're longer than South Dakota Class battleships, and only a little bit shorter than the Iowa Class at 887 foot. They are considerably narrower, though, at 76 feet wide, compared to 108 feet for the Iowas. So they're a very long and sleek design. They only draw 22 feet of water. Because they're significantly wider than the older Baltimore Class cruisers, they ended up with a shallower draft. And this draft is significantly shallower than the Iowas, which means even though their guns have less range, they can still get closer to shore to do that shore bombardment. Propulsion-wise, both ships, the Des Moines and the Iowas, are designed for 33 knots. It takes 212,000 horsepower for an Iowa to get there, but only 120,000 for Salem too. The Des Moines have about 10,000 nautical miles of range, which is about 2/3 that of the Iowa Class battleships. Because of the significant width and torpedo protection scheme on the Iowas, they just have more room for fuel than the Des Moines. However, the Des Moines are significantly more fuel efficient, even though both ships have pretty similar arrangements with steam propulsion plants and geared turbines. Both ships have 4 propellers, although whereas the Iowas have 8 engineering main spaces with the boilers and the engineering equipment in 2 separate rooms. The Des Moines have a single boiler per turbine unit and are able to cram them into 1 room, much like the older fast battleships prior to the Iowa class. The Des Moines only have a single rudder, however, were still relatively maneuverable and featured even more spaces to steer from than the Iowa Class battleships with as many as 4 redundant steering positions. The Des Moines carried about 1,800 men fully loaded, which is pretty close to an Iowa Class battleship. It's more than some battleships and just under what the Iowas had. In terms of armor, these ships have a 6-inch belt, which is comparable to earlier cruisers and sufficient for defeating 8-inch guns. Won't do a thing against battleship guns, but the world into which these ships were born featured very few battleships. The deck is 3.5 inches thick, so it's proportionally thicker compared to the belt. The turrets have a faceplate 8 inches thick, the barbettes are 6.3 inches thick, and the conning tower is 6.5 inches thick. So all in all, this is a pretty good armor scheme for a cruiser. Doesn't stop battleship shells, but like I said earlier, there just aren't that many battleships around. And by the end of these ships' careers, there are none in active commission anywhere in the world. Now, firepower is where the real comparison is. These ships were designed to have about 12 20mm guns, significantly fewer than Iowa Class battleships, but that is because these guns were starting to fall out of favor by the time these guns entered service. So they certainly had the deck area for significantly more. They were designed for 12 twin mounts for 3-inch 50 caliber guns, which is a comparable number to the number of 40mm mounts on earlier Baltimore and Oregon City class cruisers. The Iowa class battleships had 20 40mm mounts, but in the unused plan to redesign these ships to carry 3-inch guns instead, they would have carried about 12 mounts, just like Salem and Des Moines. So the medium anti-aircraft battery is pretty comparable. The 3-inch twin is better than the quad 40mm at stopping jets and kamikazes and those sorts of things. The 20mm batteries are not really comparable, but they could have been. So I'd consider that a wash for close-in air defense. These ships were designed with the same Mark 37 directors and had the same sort of Mark 56 directors that the Iowas were later equipped with. So their fire control capabilities were pretty similar in the anti-aircraft role. The one shortcoming, Des Moines, like older American cruisers, only has 6 twin mounts for 5-inch 38 caliber guns, as opposed to the 10 twin mounts that the Iowa class battleships have. However, because they have a gun forward and aft of the superstructure on the center line, it means that their broadside is 4 twin mounts instead of the 5 of an Iowa. So their broadside is almost comparable, plus their 8-inch guns can be used as anti-aircraft weapons. In fact, there's even a Ford Mark I Able fire control computer associated with the 8-inch guns to plot anti-aircraft solutions. So that gives them a pretty impressive AA firepower that the Iowas didn't. There are some documents that suggest that the Iowas could have used their 16-inch guns as anti-aircraft shells, but there's no evidence that this was ever done. And with the rate of train and elevation of those guns, I doubt it could have been done effectively. However, Newport News may have shot down a North Vietnamese jet aircraft during the Vietnam War with her 8-inch guns. So I'd say in terms of anti-aircraft capability, these ships are very close to on par. And we haven't even gotten to the best feature. The Mark 16 8-inch 55 caliber gun that these ships were armed with was automatic. Be sure to check out our video on that amazing weapon system to hear just how cool I think it is and how effective it was. It has a lot of features that the Iowa class battleships just a few years older do not have. And it really makes this weapon system stand out. The long and the short of it is, because these guns are automatic, they're able to fire between 8 and 10 rounds per barrel per minute. They have the same 9-barrel configuration as the other heavy cruisers and the fast battleships for that matter. However, that 8 to 10 rounds per minute is really crazy. With a projectile of about 350 pounds, you multiply that by the 8 rounds per minute, and it comes up to just under 2,700 pounds per barrel. An Iowa Class battleship has a theoretical rate of fire of 2 rounds per minute, but in actuality, 1 round per minute is more likely. So an armor-piercing round is about 2,700 pounds, meaning a Des Moines Class cruiser can fire the same weight of ordnance as an Iowa Class battleship. This is really interesting for a smaller, cheaper vessel. And no other cruiser in the world comes anywhere close to being able to do this. Another feature that these ships have in common with other American cruisers, but that Iowa Class battleships do not, is a hangar on the fantail. So they can keep boats and aviation assets inside the ship, protected, and do maintenance work on them, whereas the Iowas can't. We've made a video on the ship's hangar, and there's a link to that in the description below as well. In my mind, there's only one other cruiser ever built that compares to the Des Moines, and that's the Alaska Class large cruisers. Relatively similarly sized ship, but with 12-inch guns instead of fast-firing 8-inch guns. Those of you who play World of Warships know how deadly these ships can be, and you'll note that while Des Moines is a Tier 10 cruiser, Alaska and the Iowa Class are both Tier 9. Meaning that Des Moines is the better ship in game, in theory. And in practice, I agree with that. The Des Moines are absolutely amazing. Despite only being a few years newer, they represent a leap in technology so significant that it's hard for the battleships to compete. The battleships, of course, have more size, more surface area, more displacement, and that means that you can modernize them more, which ultimately is why when the Reagan administration was trying to decide between bringing back the 3 Des Moines and arming them with Tomahawk cruise missiles, or bringing back the 4 Iowas, they chose the Iowas. That plus the 16-inch guns range. However, in a naval fight, I'd love to have a Des Moines on my side, and even in short bombardment, the amount of fire that they can lay on an area is absolutely incredible. Much like with the Iowas, depending on the ship of the class, have between 12 and 22 years of active service. The 3 Des Moines had something similar, with about a decade of service for the 2 that were decommissioned sooner, and about 25 years for Newport News. Regardless, because the age of the gunship had given way to the age of the missile, these ships did not see the full service life that they could have. Do you believe that's a mistake and that these ships could have seen more service? Let us know in the comment section down below. Also, let me know if you guys agree that these ships were better than the Iowa Class in many circumstances. Finally, let us know if there are any other ships you'd like to see us do comparison videos about in the future. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your continued support. There are links down in the description if you would like to continue to support Battleship New Jersey, and if you would like to support the restoration of Salem, the last heavy cruiser that you can visit. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so that more people find out about our channel. Thanks for watching.